Let's go ahead and get this started. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Life of Champ podcast. For today's episode 254, we're going to be discussing the realization after experienced implementation. And I'll go ahead and explain that in a second. But if you do not know who I am, my name is Champ and I help men win. I'll be helping you guys out with giving you information like this that will hopefully give some perspective about life experience for sure. And other than that, make sure you go and follow me on Twitch, TikTok, Rumble, Spotify, X, Kick, all Life of a Champ podcasts, pretty much on every single platform. And let's go ahead and get into it. So, realization after experienced implementation, and the way that I interpret this, this is something that I said recently, on a podcast, and it kind of like stuck with me. I was speaking about a specific habit that I had implemented, and you need to kind of go through certain things as far as many different things in life, many different experiences. You need to have different experiences in life, and you can now come to a more sound, let's just say, conclusion after you had already did that. But if you don't front the work, then you can't come to that conclusion. Like, let me give you an example, okay? Let's just say you're going to the gym, right? Let's just say you go to the gym 6 times a week. I used to go 6 times a week, right? I needed to go through that experience to understand that it is okay after a certain period of time of going to the gym that is probably going to be reaping maybe even less results than if I just went 3 or 4 times a week. But I needed to go through that experience to have the realization after experienced implementation to not repeal the days in which I go to the gym, right? And of course, if it's your active lifestyle and you want to keep doing that, that's fine. We'll go ahead and do that. But here's the thing. I do believe that there are certain realizations that you have that need to be had. And here's the thing. If I just went 3 times a week, right? I started to the gym and I just went 3 times a week and I didn't make as much progress, right? I would never come to that conclusion. Or maybe I would make progress, but maybe I wouldn't make progress as fast as I did. And maybe I kind of started in the right area, but I never had that, let's just say, transgressed experience, transgressed perspective, right? And I feel there's a lot of these perspectives that need to be had, that you need to go through, and that it is better, even if you can get the answer right in the very, very beginning, kind of right. You need to go through different phases in order to solidify that that's the actual answer. And the way that I had did it is this, right? You come to understand that there are certain main messages that come through the experiences of life, right? And you get those, and those become an internalized message, an internalized personality, an internalized identity within yourself. But you can only get that through going through something, right? And I'll give you an example. Let's just say somebody tells you, hey, you know what? It's not good for you to do drugs, right? And this, I get this to an extent, or let's just say we'll use alcohol for example. Most people probably watching this either younger. If you're a little bit older, maybe you drink alcohol. I'm gonna say 90% of people either will drink alcohol or are drinking alcohol right now. Okay, if somebody said, we've heard people say, oh, don't drink alcohol. Alcohol is bad. Obviously, we understand that it's not the best thing for our body. We understand this, right? But here's the thing: when you hear this rhetoric from let's just say two different people, right? One person has never drank a drop of alcohol their entire life, and you have another person who's been a drunk, who's had plenty of experience, and then they tell you, hey, don't drink alcohol, right? You're automatically going to perceive this. At least I can speak for myself. You are going to perceive this differently, right? And the way that I personally perceive that type of person is here's the thing: you have a person who's almost naive, and I'll get into that a little bit later, right? There's a person that is almost naive to an experience and tells you, hey, you shouldn't experience that. And there's a person who is experienced and telling you, hey, that experience actually isn't as worth it as you think it is. You see what I'm saying? Those those two different types of experiences completely have a different reaction in the real world. At least this is what I believe in. And that is the realization after experienced implementation, right? There are certain things that you need to go through, certain things you need to do, certain character traits that need to be built, right? Certain experiences that need to be had in order to come to an actual good, solid conclusion, right? But like I said, this is gonna be let's just say nuanced. All information on the internet is somewhat nuanced, right? Obviously, right? So use this, and I'm gonna say use this when it applies. In other situations, maybe it doesn't apply. Like for example, right? Let's just say somebody tells me, hey, you know what? Don't smoke black tar heroin, right? The most basic, let's just say something crazy, just like a crazy drug or something like that, right? I don't need to go through that experience to understand that it's probably not going to be the best thing for me, right? I don't need that, right? At least I can speak for myself. And I know it sounds very, very hypocritical and, contradictory to an extent. But here's the thing. I understand that there's nothing great that can come from that, right? I understand that drinking alcohol, at least like I'm trying to defend that, I guess you could say, there is great moments that can happen from that, great celebrations that can be had, right? And yes, it can be, and maybe potentially, and like I said, maybe this is cope. Maybe it could be potentially enhanced with drinking alcohol, right? But I don't think there's any human experience that you can have, and it doesn't take a genius to realize this, where you think you go ahead and experience the high of fucking um taking a drug like black tar heroin, right? And then coming to the conclusion afterwards saying, you know what, maybe I probably shouldn't do that, right? I don't think it takes a genius to understand that. That's why I said this information is particularly nuanced. But I do believe that there are certain things that you can benefit from, certain habits that you can instill that must be experienced, that must be learned from, that must be, attached to your identity for a certain extended period of time, that you now can begin to say, you know what, this is of actual importance. This is something that I've taken away from this. I no longer need to do this. This no longer serves me as much as it once did, and that is okay. And now I can take exactly what I needed from that. I have character built, I have experience on top of that, and then I can go forth with life with that experience, with that wisdom, with that whatever, right? And you must find those specific things for yourself, right? Maybe you're trying to avoid doing a certain habit. Maybe you're avoiding, taking a risk or taking a step into the next chapter of life, right? But maybe you need to make that experience happen in order to come to certain conclusions. Maybe you need to adopt that certain habit in order to build your character traits up. And like I said, obviously, as anything, right? As anything that you do within this life, maybe you do something for a little bit, maybe it doesn't serve you as much as it once did, and maybe you need to go ahead and release that, but at least you learned something. At least it shaped your character. But to be resistant to any habits, or to be resistant to any things that are going to build your character, or to be resistant to even any experience that could shape and alter your experience and your perspective, would be would be doing yourself a disservice, right? And like I said, obviously, you must understand that this advice is nuanced. This type of information is nuanced. This is going to apply in certain situations, and obviously, it's going to look goofy in other situations, right? But I just think the same message can be perceived differently from two different perspectives, right? And it can be the right thing, and it can be the same message, and you can come to the same conclusion. And the way that I like to describe this is like, let's just say, in school when you were trying to do, like, let's just say you were doing a math problem, right? And you didn't show your work, right? You came to the same conclusion, but you didn't show your work. You still need to show your work because that work shows something that people can see and recognize, right? You might not always need it, but for the most part, you probably should have it. Because if you have it, if you have it, then it shaped your character. If you had it, then you have the right process, right? So that's kind of like a silly example, but that's exactly what I would say with the realization after experienced implementation. That's exactly the way that I would kind of like describe it as far as like a silly example. Um, but yeah, like I said, those things are going to be perceived differently. A person that's going to be able to portray a certain message or say a certain thing, if they have experience, if their character was shaped based off of that, right? If their identity was now different because of that experience, people are going to take that differently. And it's not like, obviously, I'm not this is not rocket science. Obviously, this probably isn't a completely profound new thing that you've never heard of, and I don't particularly expect it to be. But what I will say is you must take these things into account. You must take these things into your experience, because you will see certain things. You will see these things within people. You will see these things within yourself and your own personal experience, where it is better to have an experience than to never have the experience at all, regardless of how it goes, because at least it shaped the character that could be potentially in front of you right now, right? Or that potentially the experience that you have in your own life. And to an extent, I feel like the people, and I know, yeah, I've had a very, very, with experience in general, right? I always said when I was a little bit much more, naive, I would say something along the lines of, you know, experience is kind of overrated, right? I have a podcast that I made, let's just say, I don't know, maybe like a couple years ago or something like that now, where I discussed the topic of acquired wisdom versus experience, right? Acquired wisdom being the observer of life, right? Yes, you can learn a lot by being an observer, right? The observer, the observer is the experience of ex- observing people who are experienced, right? But it isn't the experience itself, right? Yes, you can be shaped somewhat by what you don't do, but you are more importantly shaped by what you do and come out on the other side of. And that's very, very important. So, yes, I do believe that observations are important. I do believe acquired wisdom through those observations is just as important, of course. But what I do understand thoroughly, and this is something that everybody should begin to understand, experience is still king. And that's what it is. Maybe you need to go through certain things in order to come out and be able to tell a story on the other end. That's just what it is. And there are certain things you have to go through. There are certain things that you should easily avoid yourself of, like I mentioned with that example of certain drugs and things like that. But to an extent, you must be able to have the experience. You must be able to speak about it from a place of experience, right? Because people will receive that differently. It's a completely different experience in terms of receiving, right? If I came on here and I said, "Hey, you need to do this habit because I heard people say it's very, very good. I've never tried it myself, but you should try this habit." You don't sound as compelling. You don't sound as convincing. You don't sound like you're speaking from a place of experience. But if I tell you, you know what, you should do this habit because it's very, very good. Like I'll give you an example, right? A habit that I upheld. It's been a little bit since I've upheld it, but I can speak about it because I've experienced it, right? Let's just say it's a good experience for you to go ahead and consistently try the cold plunge for at least a couple weeks, right? Do it a few times and see how you feel. It's a very, very good time. It is one of the most dreading moments that you will have in your day, but once you do it, with the feeling that you will have after doing it, it is a completely worth it experience, even though it completely initially and while you're doing it completely sucks, right? But I can, but here's the thing: if I never had experienced that, and yes, and I'm like, you know what? I heard people talk about this because I'm an observer, like I mentioned, right? People say this is good for you, but I've never done it myself. I'm too scared or I'm too naive to do it. You're not going to take that person with any amount of complete seriousness, at least as much seriousness as that person probably wants to be taken, right? Taken with. But here's the thing: me saying that I've experienced that. I came out on the other end saying, you know what, if I have inflammation in my body, that's probably going to be the best bet. But if I don't, maybe I'm young, maybe my body heals quickly, maybe I don't need to utilize that as much, right? But I come to those conclusions after I had the realization of experienced implementation after, right? And it's completely different for sure. I'm going to read the comments and then I'll get back into it. Anthony, appreciate for tapping in. Jaden said, I feel everyone has different experiences they're required to go through for their own development. Sometimes it's the same as others, and sometimes it's not because we all have grown up differently. But one person experiencing something and another person choosing not to doesn't necessarily make either one wrong. One just needed it and the other didn't. If you refuse to maybe try drugs, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with refusing, but it's not okay to push others to try them or to stop them. Sure, maybe like I said, that's your opinion, and to an extent that has some truth for sure. Um, but yeah, I'd say it's very, very rare, and like I mentioned, nuance. This is going to be nuanced. It's very, very rare where more experience is actually to your detriment, right? So take that with some perspective, right? The people who are experienced, they're much more admired for sure, right? I can be a person all day talking about things in which I think that I've never done, but until I've actually done them, like for example, right? I could talk about all day about being a father. But if I'm not a father and I have never implemented those specific things in terms of fatherhood, yeah, I might have the right idea, but I don't have any actual implementation to that. And it's as simple as that, right? I'm a father right now, but here's the thing. My perspective is much more it is very, very similar to what it was, but it's still different because I'm in the process of experiencing that. And that makes it different. You see what I'm saying? It's easy to say things are easier said than done, obviously, but when they're done, they're taken differently. They're received differently from other people. That's for sure. I know that for a fact. And I want to get into this also this perspective as well, and I've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I want to get a little bit deeper into this. Right, the element of selective naivety is a decision that most people make unconsciously, right? For you to do or to not do something, but to understand that this concept exists, to be selectively naive, to remove yourself from the experience because of the potential, negative, right? Because, and like I said, I think it's very, very key to understand that the things that are worth doing are the ones that are going to push your character and build your character. The things that are worth truly avoiding are the ones who are not going to contribute to either a neutral or a good experience. Those are the things that you must be striving to be um, naive to, right? That's what I will say. Um, you make the decision to not do something because of the effects that it potentially can have. Um, Obviously, you understand the potentiality that does exist from those things, and like I said, if it's not particularly neutral or good experience, good character building that can come from that, then obviously it's probably worth not doing. So, and like I mentioned, most things are probably worth at least experiencing once, at the very least, right? And there's something that can be taken. There's hopefully something that can at least be neutral or good that can shape your character, and that might be worth doing. But to be removed from that experience, to be resistant to the negatives of that experience when it could be potentially good. This is something that I also recognize within a lot of people, right? They avoid themselves from doing a certain habit. Let's just say, for example, let's just say it's going up to women, right? This is something that the modern day man is completely scared of for whatever reason, right? Most men nowadays are scared to go up to women because there's a lot of negatives that can come out of that. Obviously, right? You can get rejected right to your face. Women could basically tell you without telling you, "Hey, you're not good enough." To your face, pretty much, by rejecting you, of course. And that's obviously a terrible experience. But the potential good of that experience is so damn good that it is almost a waste of time for you to be existing and not doing that experience unless, like I said, unless you're in a relationship or whatever. So if you see a pretty girl, it's probably going to be worth your time if you're a single man to go ahead and go up to her and try to create a conversation with her, because you never know where it can go. Because it could go completely bad. She could, make fun of you, say no, you know, embarrass you. Fine. She could also be the mother of your children. And here's the thing. Those decisions are I'm not going to say they're always good, but at the very least, the potentiality that does exist is number one, at the very least neutral, because even if she rejects you, you're still building your character. And if she's the mother if she's the mother of your children, then you just found one of the rarest things in the human experience, one of the most sought after things in the male experience. So when taking into account the certain habits, certain things you want to go ahead and do, certain things that you probably should do, you must analyze it from that perspective. Is this thing at least going to build my character? Does this thing have potential good upside? And if it does it outweigh the bad upside? And if it does, then you probably should do it. You probably should do it, because here's the thing: it is what I would deem to be a worthwhile experience. Because at the very least, even if it goes bad, if it can potentially go good, then you have something to talk about. You have experience to come to the table with. You have a story to tell. If you have no story to tell, then you have no character. And if you have no character, no one wants to hear what you have to say. And if no one wants to hear what you have to say, then you're fucking insignificant. right? And that's as simple as that, bro. So the realization after experienced implementation is something that is very, very key. You must look for the opportunities that can come when it comes to building your character. Certain habits, certain certain yeah, I guess you could say certain habits, certain experiences, trying new things, right? All those things, man. So hopefully you can find more of those positions that you can find yourself in, and if you do, then it's probably going to be much, much more rewarding than most things. And that's just what it is, brother. So yeah, try new things, be willing to experience more. And here's the thing, maybe this is part of this is me saying it to y'all, part of this is me saying it to myself. So, you know, just be ready. Just be ready for those things. You need to develop your character. This is what it's all about, right? I have evolved to inspire on the back for a reason, man. I understand thoroughly. I created this podcast to develop my character. I created this podcast to figure out what I value, to figure out what I believe in, and that's character. Going through these experiences is going to build the character. So put yourselves in position to win by building your character. That's all I have to say for today's episode. This was episode 254 of the Life of Champ podcast, talking about realization after experienced implementation. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, comment. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, leave it in the comments. I would love to hear your perspective. And other than that, tap in with the next podcast that I'm going to be doing on hopefully Thursday as well. Going to be going live hopefully Monday. Tap in with that for sure. And if I do have any changes, make sure you stay locked into the YouTube community. I'll be giving you updates when I'll go live, whether it's live or going for a live stream. Tap in with that for sure. But other than that, tap in with my school community. And yeah, hopefully this can help you win. And yeah, that's all I have to say, man. Thank you for your time and attention. Next podcast on Thursday. Y'all have a good night.